primarily was on waterfront, because basically waterfront has two front yards. But they also, they also agreed to notify once they finished these. And this is the first, when I saw this on our board packet on Thursday or Friday, when I saw it online, was the first time that I know they had finished these. I got no notification that they'd actually finished their end of it back in October. I see it written here, but I wasn't aware of it. I've been watching for it. I would have spoke up back in October had I known that they had done this. But I'm not trying to throw rain on their parade, but what we talked about in the workshops and what it seemed to be agreed upon by the planning commission, which I understand it's their venue to do whatever they want to do, regardless of input. But it seemed to me like that they thought that would solve the problem by allowing people to put it in the front yard. And not only are they allowing it in the front yard, but they're still allowing it in the side yard and in the non-buildable area. And we've had numerous people complain about this. In addition to that, they have this map here that shows there's 4 triangular areas where it says you can't put any equipment there. And it doesn't say if it's in the non-buildable area or if it's a buildable area. You may have a 1-acre lot. It says you can't put it there. Unfortunately, we're talking about 2 different types of equipment here. Air conditioners run, of course, on electricity, and the big problem is whatever heat they generate and whatever noise they generate. Generators, on the other hand, generate toxic fumes. So therefore, they can't be anywhere near a window. And this diagram actually creates a problem for locations of generator, irregardless of what it costs you to locate it. But the true problem here with contractors that have approached our building official and asked for these things is that they want to save money. If you put it right next to the meters, the gas meter and the electric meter, it's a heck of a lot cheaper than if you put it 30, 40 feet away. Gas piping has to be larger. In the case of an air conditioner, you may have to put a second disconnect. There's all kinds of reasons. And I don't believe that we should be changing our ordinances because some contractor wants to save some money.
Okay, so that was a mouthful there, so I gotta
Right.
back up. I think there were some things you stated that I might not agree with, so I
Okay.
tried to write them down.
All right.
And so if I might do this, Mr. Tominello, I might ask you, because I had a conversation with you. You'd indicated your concerns with the side yard. They're not allowed in the side yard setback on a conforming lot.
Correct, which is kind of silly. If we're going to allow them, why not allow them there? They probably have more room on the side when they have a 70-foot lot than somebody that has a 50-foot lot.
Not if they're built to
Not
setbacks. I
necessarily.
mean, if you're built to setbacks, you're built to setbacks
That's correct.
regardless of the side of your lot.
That's correct.
Right.
Well,
So they are allowed, they are only, the majority of homes are conforming, I mean, I don't know what that percent is, but certainly for new construction, obviously they're conforming lots, they're not non-conforming lots. But within those non-conforming lots, you have in many cases a building envelope where it's pushed to the extreme limit, which would eliminate the opportunity for a side yard installation. But this does not say that in all cases they can be in the side yard setback. That's only for non-conforming. Just a point of clarification.
right, and I agree with you.
You'd mentioned that they can't be in the front yard, and I
No, I said they can be.
They can.
they can be.
So that-
I thought I heard you say they
That
can't
solves the
be.
problem. Why should they be in the side yard anymore?
Well, it
Everybody has a front yard.
provides for an option. That may not be the best, a front yard may not be the best installation in every home, but
And I
that's an
agree.
option that we want to allow for in the event
Yeah.
that it's a more practical
No
installation.
matter how you write this, there's gonna be some exceptions. That's what zoning board of appeals is for.
Absolutely.
If they only had one option, and that would be in the side yard, in the non-buildable, they could go to zoning board of appeals and they would entertain that.
Sure.
So I really don't see the reason for this. In addition, as I said, Larry, maybe you can explain why you have these 4 triangles that say you can't put the equipment there.
Well, if I may, Mr. Servio, you'd mentioned about 6 concerns, and I'd like to address those before we go further in
Well, this,
deliberation.
yeah, that is part of this same ordinance.
Understood. Another thing that you'd mentioned was you were told there would be noticing and there would be no noticing. I don't know, I wasn't there, but the noticing that occurs on a public level occurs after our first reading, and that maybe that's what somebody was referring to. I don't know that.
No, it was a matter of being a courtesy to primarily to the zoning board of appeals, but also to this body.
Okay,
it would have been useful to me, even if I didn't serve on ZBA, to see this, in October after they decided this is what they came up with for a final product.
I see.
And I thought, am I wrong? Is that what I understood we were gonna have? We talked about it, and I thought that was what planning commission agreed to.
So there was one additional public workshop that you didn't attend where we made these final changes.
And
We had full agreement, and I can get into a lot of the details and mechanics on why we chose this, but the whole thing is, again, in trying to be, sort of user-friendly to our residents, we felt that anyone in a non-conforming lot is at a disadvantage or a hardship, especially on the waterfront. In that case, we made the exception, if it's a non-conforming lot, to keep the air conditioning, or to allow the air conditioner or generator in the side yard setback on a non-conforming lot. And again, that was to keep the folks in the non-conforming lot, to give them options. They have the option to put it in the back, options to put it in the side, or options to put it in the front. So that's what we decided on. It was unanimous at the board meeting, and that's why that was changed. So you did miss the final meeting, public meeting.
in
to
defense of
make
me,
these-
I was invited and I stated this, exactly what I stated. I serve on zoning board of appeals, not planning commission. I gave my input. I thought that there was a reasonable compromise came at that first workshop, and I declined to come again because I figured I had made my case for better or for worse, and what was
Yeah.
the sense in reiterating the same thing?
No one's complaining you didn't come, I just think Mr. Tominello was saying maybe that
Well,
was a part of that.
I guess
noticing
what I am
process.
is I'm surprised because this is 180 degrees from what we talked about at that workshop.
Yeah,
And I understand they have the right to do that.
I don't know that I would agree with the statement, it's 180 degrees. I don't think this is a complete flip of everything that was talked about, but there are certainly some tweaks. One other point that you mentioned that this is all about saving contractors money. I would say, a couple of exceptions to that. One is I don't know that a contractor is in a position to really, A, save money or make this decision. I think the ultimate decision falls on our residents, and when a resident says, well, I don't care how much it costs, I want it over there, the contractor isn't saving money or spending extra money, the resident is. I don't perceive that because we have an ordinance that requires additional money, that all the contractors will lose money when they're in Harrison Township. If I ask you to do something that costs $5,000 more, you're probably gonna charge me $5,500. You're happy to do it, it's $500 a profit. So I think these ordinance changes are not to placate contractors, they're to satisfy repeated requests that we're getting from residents. The contractor ultimately is trying to satisfy that resident. I don't think that's why I take a little bit of exception to say that this is to placate
Well, I could give
contractors.
you, I'm not gonna state publicly this case, but there is a case that's currently, being debated, if you will, out on the lake. And the neighbor wants to put a generator on the side of the house because he claims that the contractor said if you put it where the neighbor would like it, which is further away from where the location is, it would cost an extra $1,500.
But that doesn't save the contractor any money, that saves that's a decision
the-
of one resident saying, I don't care about the placement, I only care about $1,500. That's
The
all
guy-
I'm trying to
The man
say.
hasn't done it because he doesn't wanna spend the extra $1,500. So
Okay.
the contractor therefore didn't get the job. All right, so I think we've gone through this one enough. I have two others that I have that are of lesser importance, but nevertheless. The next one is Article 16, Section 1601 N2B.
I jumped
But before we leave that, I did have one question.
Section
Section 6 of the ordinance.
From the, going back to the other one, what, did the, was the, fire chief, brought in on this, did he okay putting these things where you block the whole side yard? And you could theoretically, if you put a generator there, you're blocking at least 4.5 to 5 feet of the side yard, even without screening. I'd like to know,
There's no screening required in the side yard under the ordinance.
it says screening on all of them, unless I read it wrong.
Just the front yard.
Okay, section 16. Find my place here.
Mr. Ruth had
Mr. Hu, did you have some?
Just while you're looking for your comments, Mr. Servio, I was just gonna suggest that, this is just a time that we're publishing it, we'll adopt it. You maybe could get a input from the fire chief in this interim period here, might be a good thing to follow up on. And that's really what that period's for, to solve issues that come up at this meeting.
Good point, thank you.
Yep. The section that you're looking for, I think, is titled Section 6 in the ordinance, to make it,
Correct.
simple, right?
Correct.
It begins,
And it's, N2, structure and lot shall conform with the following. And it says side yard setback shall be no less than 6 feet, which I have no problem with that myself. In no case shall new structure be built closer than 12 feet to an existing structure. Okay, well, our current ordinance, says that you can have a detached structure, like a detached garage behind your house, 10 feet away without any kind of fire separation. But sitting on zoning board of appeals at the same table, many times I've asked the chief if something that was only 7 or 8 feet away, if that's okay, and he said, unfortunately, I don't really like that, but it's allowed. What my problem with this is that I think it's excessive in some cases. I have no problem with a 12-foot separation as long as the house next door is actually meeting setbacks. But in many cases, as you pointed out, we have older subdivisions, and there's places where the houses are only 3 feet away. So if that happens to be a vacant lot on the house, next door to a non-conforming house, then they may have a 50-foot lot. Whatever remaining lots are out there in Huron Point sub of 700 or 900 lots, there are some vacant ones still. And those people are paying $150,000, $200,000 for a lot, and you're taking away possibly maybe 3 feet of their buildable lot by making this 12-foot. And what
they do have the right to go to the zoning board if they
well,
want to
and
variance for
at
that.
the same time, we've been talking about trying to simplify the rules, and now you're throwing something out
Right,
there that,
so let me address that, because I think this is important, and I think this is at the core of what we're talking about. We adopted a new zoning ordinance, and in a short period of time, our building official heard from several residents, several builders, several instances where air conditioners in the side yard or alternative locations for air conditioners were becoming a frequent and recurring problem. So based on the frequency of that request, our answer was, well, you can go to zoning board of appeals. So building official had indicated, we're gonna be sending a lot of people to the zoning board of appeals because this request becomes frequently. Now the flip, so in order to avoid those, planning commission says, hey, you know what, these special conditions, non-conforming lots, we gotta pinch it up a little bit because we already have a hardship. So we're gonna try to grant that and avoid those ZBA cases. The flip side is, as you just described, it's true that the 12 feet may be more restrictive than the prior ordinance, but you just described, let's find a non-conforming 50-foot lot, and let's assume that there happens to be one side where there's only 3 feet. That's gonna occur once every 5 years.
I agree.
That's not gonna occur five
I
times a
agree,
year.
but as
So-
I said, I don't have a problem with the 6 foot, which has been, as long as I've lived here, it's been 6 foot and a total of 14 feet.
Sure,
And
but-
it stays that way, I have no problem with that.
Right, but the current ordinance said I could have 6 foot, you could have 6 foot, right? We got 6 and 8, right? So this 12 foot is just an acknowledgement to say, hey, we'd like that separation. If you want some variance from that, come on in, you can go to the zoning board. It may add some additional variance cases, but I don't think that's a very, very common condition that you have that.
So
It does
what,
occur.
so what would be the purpose of putting it in there then? If we already have an ordinance that you can't be less than 6 feet with a total of 14 feet, if you happen to have somebody, the south side of their house is 6 feet, and the north side of the guy next door that's building is 6 feet, you're gonna have 12 feet.
I think the point goes back to your comments earlier about a generator and air conditioning is the same, some of the fire safety concerns, and I'm sure there's an aesthetic appeal to having lot separation as well.
Right. So there are conditions where we might say, wow, this really is a perfect example where we could deviate from that 12 foot. Or on the inverse, maybe someone says, well, I insist that I only do my front yard or my rear yard, my setback where I place that structure on a deep lot here. And you say, well, no, we're not gonna grant you the variance. Move your structure forward or rearward on a deep lot to solve this problem. there's too many variables to say we'll always write something. All I was trying to say was, you described the perfect storm, that I've got a 3-foot side yard and a 50-foot vacant, non-conforming lot right next to it. That may not even exist, but if it does, it exists 1-2 places max. And it may not even vary. The person may say, I don't wanna be 6 feet away from my neighbor, I'm comfortable with the
So
12
then if
feet.
there's only 1 or 2 cases in the whole township, why are we changing the ordinance to make it 12 feet? It's a given already, you're gonna have it.
Mr.
Well,
Supervisor?
we're not changing the ordinance tonight.
Here's what the
Hold on,
prob-
let me finish. We're not changing the ordinance tonight. That is the existing ordinance.
Right,
But
that's
here is the
existing
problem.
ordinance.
You have someone that has a house that's 10 feet apart. Like in the subdivision I built a house in last year, the 3,500 square foot lots. What you're doing is creating a hardship for those people if they wanna put a second-story addition on. Traditionally, the zoning board of appeals usually allows, if you're not encroaching further into the non-buildable area, you need a variance. But we still grant the variance, even if what they're doing is on the other side of the house, we still cite that they need a variance to continue this nonconformity on that side of the house. So what you're doing is you're not allowing them to go up on the second floor even, if it's less than 12 feet between structures.
Without a variance.
so
You just
it's-
said though,
it's-
the ZBA regularly.
It's going to be a lot more than 2 is what I'm pointing out.
Mr. Supervisor, if I can, keep in mind that, we can change ordinances at any time.
Anytime.
The whole purpose of the perfecting amendments was to address a lot of the building department and building officials' recommendations. My recommendation is to, accept these and let's start the process. If in fact we find out there's more amendments we have to make, we always have that flexibility to make additional amendments. You don't know how fast the boat's gonna go until you get into it. So we need to understand, put these in place and find out, what's usable, what's not usable, or, again, I'm not saying these are perfect, and nobody is. But if we find more issues with them, we can always bring them back.
Right.
Or
I
is
think
it
I think the point worth making though is within this section 6, the N2 section, A, where it says no case shall a new structure be built closer than 12 feet to an existing structure. Point is we had not heard over the last year and a half of using this ordinance, the building department's not coming to us saying this is a problem. Most of those 50-foot lots that we're talking about, like, for example, within, the neighborhood that you just discussed, if there is a vacant lot there, right? Or if there is one, say, in the Huron Point subdivision.
2/3 of those lots are vacant net sub.
Understood, but what I'm saying is if we look at some of those areas where we know we've got lots of non-conformance, chances are any reasonable structure is gonna be built with a whole series of variances. So, but the key here is that this built closer than 12 feet has really been adopted for a year and a half, and it hasn't generated the problems that these other areas that are bolded and underlined
I
have
agree,
generated,
it's not
right?
anywhere near in my list of critical things. The first one I addressed is much more critical.
There you go, and it's an area we're changing today, right? This area that you're describing, the concern about the closer than 12 feet, we changed before and it's been in place for a year and a half. It's not subject, it's not up for review now. That doesn't mean we can't just like, let's make it 10 feet or 100 feet. We have that authority, but planning commission hasn't gone through the deliberative
So
process to review that.
anyway, in the interest of time, I have one more, and it's the least offensive, if you will, for lack of better terminology, and that would be Article 8, Section 1804.
Article 7, Article 8?
Section 7 in the new ordinance.
1804, section 7, got it, I saw it down there. They're out of order, and I thought, well, I was already at 16, and it goes back down to 8,
Okay.
sorry.
Originally, our building official, our previous building official, informed me that the state law, or the code only allowed for six-month, building permit, even on new construction without a variance. So, I thought that was too restrictive because, I guess it was always that way and I just wasn't apprised of it because it was pretty much a given that you got an extension. The problem here is especially now that we have a shortage of skilled trades in Michigan because construction was so bad for so long that people left the state or got out of the trades. And it's hard to get any tradespeople. So what this ordinance says now is that you can have 12 months, which is fine. I think that's ample time, which is more than what we had before. A variance was only good
For 6.
well, it was good for a year, as long as you pulled a permit. Now what it says is that you have to, if I'm reading this correctly, it says that the process has to be completed in a year.
No.
No,
it says-
you need to pull a permit within the 12 months and start towards completion in accordance with the terms of such permit.
Yeah, it says within such period and such erection and alteration is started and proceeds to completion in accordance with the terms.
Of the permit.
Right.
Right,
So
that's the way
the
it
key here is on the 11th month, 2 weeks into that 11th month, you come in and pull a building permit. I certainly can't expect that in the 2 weeks remaining in that 12 months, you had the house or improvement completed.
Well,
But you
actually-
have to pull the permit and work toward completion.
Actually, I believe our ordinance says you have to pull a permit within 6 months and start construction, or start it somehow.
This says 12. This is 12 months from the issuance of the variance. So you get a variance, and less than 12 months later, you pull a permit,
Well,
you're good. That's the way I
Remember what
read
we're
this.
talking about, we're talking about a variance here. I'm
That's what I
talking-
just said.
Yeah, I'm talking about any permit, whether it's a variance or not.
I understand, but let's say January 1, let's just say for conversation purposes, you are granted a variance, right? As long as you come in before January 1 of the following year and pull a valid permit and not just come in and say, well, hey, I want to build a space shuttle. You have a legitimate plan that conforms to that. You come in, you're working toward that project. In whatever case, you're good. The variance stands. That's how I read it.
Mr. Verkest, I hear what you're saying, and you could interpret it that way. I'm looking at it as a plain language. What I'm reading is that it says, basically, you gotta finish the job in 12 months. As we sit here, there's a house across the street that was erected in a factory somewhere, and it's been sitting there for months, and I assume that's because it's wintertime and they can't proceed any further. They need concrete, they need other things. That person may or may not finish within the time frame. I don't know if they needed any variances, I don't think so, but,
Right. I think where maybe the confusion is you're reading the proceeds to completion.
well,
It
I guess-
proceeds to completion in accordance with the permit.
what I'm looking at is that it's underlined, so I assume that's changes that are being made.
Yes.
All right, some of it is positive and some of it is negative. That's all I'm pointing out.
Okay. I would disagree. I would see this as saying that you can begin within you have up to the 12 months, in essence. Your variance is good for 12 months. As long as in that 12-month period, you apply for, you receive a permit, a permit is obtained, and the erection or alteration is started and proceeds to completion in accordance with the terms of the permit.
And that
So I begin, I dig a hole and I pour a foundation, then I do nothing. How long, what happens then? The point is that if you get a variance, you begin in that 12-month period and you keep working on it. Building permit expires, I walk away, I put 4 posts in the ground, I decided not to do it. 6 years later, someone comes along and says, well, I think I'm gonna finish this. No, permit expired, it's done. You gotta come and get another variance.
You do
That's what I read.
understand the permit expires at 6 months unless you ask for an extension.
Correct, but my point being that what that language reads to me is it says if you don't keep working on and finish the project, the variance disappears.
Fair enough.
All right.
Then, Mr. Supervisor, I'll go ahead and make a motion to introduce the perfecting amendments and to publish the notice of introduction, and that the full text may be reviewed at the clerk's office during regular business hours, Monday through Friday, 8 to 4:30, 8 AM to 4:30 PM.
All right. Is there a second?
Support.
All right. Now, we had a fair amount of discussion, and I think, for whatever it's worth, I think all of the discussion is a collective effort to make these revisions to the zoning ordinance as effective as possible. We might read them differently.
I understand.
But I think we're all in agreement that we're trying to, I think the term perfecting amendment is an excellent term. That's truly what we're trying to do. And take a stab at it. Worst case happens, we come back, talk about it 6 months from now, and say, wow, I didn't see it that way, we better fix it. So, Alright,
If you're ready to take a vote, I'd like a roll call.
it's a required.
You wanna do
Oh,
public-
that's right.
We haven't even done
Public
public comment.
No,
or-
but I didn't see, I was gonna ask, but I see no public comment. So-
Just,
Yep.
I mean, I know we had talked about Mr. Servial's concerns. I do have an issue with some of the equipment in the side yard. And I was talking to Mr. Condon today about it, and I don't know if there's like, I get the front yard with screening, he said that's happened a lot in the community through a variance procedure. You wouldn't even know it because they're screened, you'll never see it. So I don't have a big deal about the front yard, with that screening requirement. The side yard, especially in some of our older neighborhoods, the homes will be, maybe because of, they wanted to stay away from high water or something like that, they're built way towards the front of their lot. Somebody comes in and builds a brand new house, they're on a 50-foot lot, the people next door were on a 100-foot, they had two of them together, so they had more space. But they build that long bowling alley house that extends all the way to the back of their lot, the back of their building envelope. They put an air conditioner in their very back corner. They can do that, but that's all of a sudden this person, right next to this person's patio, who's had that patio there for 50 years and was able to enjoy peace and quiet.
Right.
So my thought, and I'm okay introducing this and maybe making some changes, is maybe making some provision that if, you have to take in consideration the alignment of the neighboring, the start of the rear of the structure next door. So when you approve that, there's some taken into consideration, so it's not creating a hardship for a neighbor. I get, if you're an old and it's existing, it is existing, you can't change that, but when you're building new, you have a choice as to where you get to put it, and if it costs you a little bit more, it's a choice of doing the work.
And that's why the compromise was made, I thought, to go to the front yard. I think it's a perfect solution.
Yeah, but I don't know-
Nobody sits out in the front yard.
But it might not be based on they might have slab construction across the front of the house and have a crawl space on the back, and to run a line is prohibitively expensive to get it out to the front, as opposed to going to
They
the
can
side.
put it on the outside even, it's done all
The point being that I think that I agree that the front yard is that alternative, but this ordinance, and this is, what Mr. Witt's talking about is exactly the window that concerned me and why I support this, but prior to a conversation with Mr. Tominello, I think more of these could come to ZBA and they should be $100. I think we should look at a different fee structure. There's one thing for a structural home versus dropping a generator or an AC unit.
And if it's new construction, it's $400, you're asking for variances across the board to build there.
Correct.
You throw the air conditioner in, not a big deal.
Correct.
But, I talked to Mr. Condon today too, and it was, wait, what if you throw $50, you're already having a meeting, throw it anyway, and we're not making our cost on whatever the number is to do that variance, it's, we have that deliberative
Yeah,
body to
so,
hear
so if
that.
you're concerned about that, I can take that back to the planning commission, and we can come back with another amendment.
Well,
And-
we
and-
can make the adjustment here at the board level.
Yeah, I just would wanna get the verbiage from the planner on that. And I think what you're trying to do is, you want an alignment maybe where it's perpendicular to a home, rather than sticking out next to an open area in your neighbor's home,
Right.
right?
Right.
So. I don't know
There's some
exact-
side yard
yeah,
installations where
yeah,
you'd
so-
look and say, this is gonna
Yeah,
really
right,
bother
no,
the next guy.
and I get it, and that makes sense, but on the other hand, if you give that person if that person puts it in the back, you still got the issue anyway, so, right, if it puts it in the back, and.
Right, but it's not reverberating off a wall and coming.
But who knows, maybe it
straight
could be on the other side, maybe it could be on the
Yeah.
front, maybe it just,
So-
the idea
so I'm
being
not
it could
I'm
be.
not opposed to that, I just
And
don't know.
I'm
I just
okay-
don't know the
I'm okay
mechanism.
on the other way to say, you can't put it in the side yard without a variance, and the variance, is a reduced cost too, if
So there
you're-
seems like enough concern over this is the way to just, is there a need to vote on it tonight? Then why don't we remand it back for revision?
Well, and that's the tricky
Gonna be
part
2
is,
months.
yeah, and here's the thing, we've really already done that in
Yes, we
essence,
have.
right?
Okay.
In the planning commission, that's why I said, as a deliberative body, they've gone through this and said, you know what? We think this is the best compromise. So, I don't know that this concern that we're describing is gonna pop up daily or regularly, but it seems like there's a potential window for a hardship on an existing property with the side yard
I guess
installation.
I'm confused, and how do we, given that what you have said here, what's the administrative or what's the plan going forward? How do we address it?
If we had some consensus tonight as to what we maybe like to see, we can approach either the planner or Mr. Huth's firm to prepare language that adjust this introduced ordinance to reflect that, And after we introduce it, when we come back for adoption, we can include those
So
changes. in
tonight's the
in
introduction and
That's
then
correct.
the, all
Just the
right. Oh, I got it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we currently have one case where a resident was fighting with someone that put an air conditioner in the side when it wasn't allowed by ordinance, and they ended up in court, and the judge said, well, you know, you're changing the ordinance, so he basically didn't rule on the case, and these people have been in limbo for well over a year.
Right, they're present here
So,
today for whatever it's
I
worth.
know,
Yeah.
I know that.
But
I know.
they are on a conforming lot, so that installation would not be, it would need, if we enact this, that would not be allowed. I feel like we've addressed that. I feel like this ordinance addressed that in a conforming environment.
To
where-
recap, I presented problems with three, by far, the air conditioner generator issue is by far the most important. I'd
I
like
think
to
we all agree on
I'd like to see you try to tweak that. I don't see any, you know, from your own arguments, Mr. Rakesh, you're saying for the few times that you may run into a problem, there's a zoning board of appeals, and you're
Agreed.
talking about changing the fee structure to make it, for something simple like that, less money.
Sure.
And I had a conversation just this morning with Mr. Witt, and he basically said the same thing, and he said, we don't need to necessarily make money on this stuff or even break even.
We don't, yeah.
It's a service to the
We don't
to the
make money on
residents.
elections, but we don't
Right.
stop us from doing it.
So, you know, with that said, why would we put this in here? Why wouldn't we just let the people come to the zoning board of appeals if they want to put it in the side yard? If it makes best sense, then the zoning board of appeals should grant that variance. Not saying they will, but, you know, I guess I'm still arguing against adoption of that particular. Is there any way that you can take part of it out and adopt the rest?
Sure.
But we're not, I thought we weren't adopting it.
We are introducing tonight, we're adopting at a future meeting.
3 weeks at least, or more.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we're not adopting it tonight.
Right, so,
Correct.
as I said, if we can build some consensus for a change we'd like to see in this area, we can, work with the planner and the attorney to make sure we have adjusted language for board, adoption when this comes back before us.
Yeah, and I think to add on to what Mr. Witt's saying, I don't think the scenario that we're talking about is likely to occur often. I think it's a rare occurrence, but I think there's a potential for its occurrence. And when that existing resident who's aggrieved by this new installation and this McMansion that went up next to their house comes into me, I have no remedy for them. I have no solution. I have no way of going to the person who's installing or building or asking for a permit and saying, too bad, you can't do that. And so this resident says, hey, I've been here 30 years and this is really destroying my backyard or really putting a damper on my backyard. And at that point, I feel confident that a zoning board would have that authority and that good common sense to say, nope, we're not gonna give you that variance. And so that mechanism in it is, but it's a narrow window. Truly,
It is.
this is a solution that's gonna solve 99% of the problems. But in respect to the planning commission, I think they've just tried to design, in essence, this machine of words, this mechanism to allow the wolves, keep the wolves out and keep the goats in, and they've done an excellent job. But my perspective, maybe Adam's or some of the board members' perspective, is a little different than theirs, because I've had to sit at that table with that person who says, this is horrible and you're allowing it to occur. And I look at the ordinance and I say, well, I don't have a mechanism to prevent this hardship. And so now I get to a point where I say, well, I guess you gotta make it a civil action, in which case someone says, geez, if it had done a better job designing this, I wouldn't have to hire a lawyer and go to court to prevent it. And that's where my concern is. I don't think it'll happen often, and I mean, I'm willing to give us a run, but my feeling is every few years, we're gonna find a scenario where this is gonna really create a nuisance.
Yeah, so I think it can be modified by very few changes to that, one or two sentences, just describing where it can't go. And I think we will be okay, actually, to cover the concern.
So, I mean, I'd be happy to take that on and work with Mr. Maher and Mr. Huth's office to make sure we make that correction, just so I have clear understanding as to the intent of the board. The concern is not, an air conditioner in the side yard within, it's not within the required side yard, it's just normally between two buildings, that's not a problem. It's if it extends beyond maybe the rear of an adjacent building.
Right, you want it in, next to both homes. It needs to be
Correct.
And-
within the walls of both homes, so it can't be sticking out, being next to a wall of a home that's longer, and then to an open patio, or maybe even to an open patio or backyard, depending if it's waterfront or not.
And if it's an inland property, then you run into the problem with the backyard. But the reason that this was discussed to start with was because of so much waterfront. If you put it in what we can see, not the street side, the opposite side, that's the side that those people use as their backyard. So
Right.
it's more important that they don't want it back there.
Yeah, I can tell you, when you put air compressors, or air conditioning compressors between homes, and there's a wall on each side, the sound goes to the road and it goes to the backyard. So it really doesn't infiltrate into the patio area or to, so I think that makes sense, Mr. Witt. And I think that would probably be a welcomed, change, and I think that would take care of that concern.
And I think it would be simply that the exception would be, in other words, everything, the language here is good, and the trigger would be that there's a structure on the adjacent lot, and that structure, and this falls outside of the side yard envelope or extreme, then it's not allowed, and then there could be a variance, you could still get the variance, but it's not automatically allowed.
And you may say it has to be within 6 feet of the end of the house if it's gonna be in the required side yard, to give it sort of that.
Yeah, a little
sort of
cushion.
sets up like a buffer.
Yep,
sound-
I would,
sets up
I'd go for
sound
that.
walls, right, you have sound walls.
Right, I would take this cartoon, and I'd draw another
You
cartoon
draw
with a
house
building.
that's further up and say
Right.
it needs to be here.
Correct, it has to be 6 foot from there.
Yes,
It could be
yeah.
here,
Yes.
6 foot from there, 6 foot and from there.
But it can't be here.
Yeah,
It
right.
can't be, yeah, it couldn't be at this extreme corner
Understood,
to
no,
where
I
it's
agree.
flowing out.
So if it's approved tonight, or introduced tonight, and these changes are made at the planning commission,
No,
No.
this is all.
We're
through-
empowered to make the changes.
This does not need to
don't
return.
have to
He's
go back.
proposing, he makes those changes and just brings them back, because we
with the
understand.
planning commission's approval, is that?
No,
It's
it
not
doesn't
No,
go
it's-
back to
we-
that.
we-
I'd be
we
happy
can-
to
They're a
send along.
recommending body.
Mr. Batkins, I'd be happy to inform them, just so nobody's caught off guard. I think I mean, personally, I appreciate the majority of all the work they've
Lots of
done in
work.
this. It's a ton of work, and I know that. The rest of the changes I don't have an issue with. It's just this one, just some of it's personal experience. So, but we are empowered to make those choices. I'd be happy to forward a copy through the planning secretary to
Understood,
them.
but there's a lot of talent on that planning
Oh, yeah.
commission that
I might point out, because I'm the naysayer here, that at the first workshop, there were 3 times as many of these perfecting amendments, and they've been worked through. And I only have a problem with 3 and a minor problem with 2 of them. It's only a major problem with 1. With that said, I would also say that if you're gonna look at the generators as a different, you gotta treat them a little differently. You don't run them very often, so that isn't an issue. The sound isn't the issue, it's access. I can see it as a problem, and in the meantime, I'm gonna talk to the chief and see if he'll write something of an opinion, whether he has a good or bad opinion on it.
Thank you.
So, make sure that I understand, you'd still like to introduce this and then modify it before it's adopted, or you'd like to hold off and introduce it
No,
later? and then-
we can introduce it now and then.
But it's okay that we can adopt something 3 to 5 weeks from now different than what we've introduced?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's the purpose of the two-step process,
That's
to be
fine.
able to make.
Correct. No, I'm good with that. I just thought that if you're introducing this and you say, okay, well, we're gonna adopt something different, it seems kinda disingenuous to go through the whole public notice and then say, well, we're gonna sit down 3 weeks from now and adopt something different. But I suppose the notice is to say, this is what we're thinking about doing. If you have a concern, you get involved. The only difference is I say, I read this and say, well, I like all this. Okay, well, we're gonna adopt something different. That's what seems odd to me, so. I just think, if I was as open and honest as possible, I wouldn't introduce something today. I would introduce something 3 weeks from now changed and with the intent of adopting that. I'd rather publish what we wanna do twice instead of publish once, one thing and adopt something different. But I'm only giving that based on what I perceive to be the most open process, not what can we do legally.
I would concur with that opinion.
But I'm not saying it must happen. I just think if I'm gonna publish something, if I'm gonna say to everybody, attention public, here's some amendments, and then turn around with the full intention, knowing today that I intend to adopt something different 3 to 5 weeks from now, I think it's,
Then why don't we
Well, I-
table it then?
that
I mean, I can say, and that's fine,
Yep.
but the notice just simply says this, like, we are making changes, it doesn't say specific, you know, like, the notice that
Yeah.
goes out.
okay.
Doesn't say the specific changes, those are,
Okay.
you know, those would be available in the clerk's office. And now I understand that
But-
we could, hold off for 3 weeks and then do it, but we've never sent anything out that people know anything about this at all. So by sending out the, you know, the introduction, then people see it.
True.
And they can come in. I mean,
Fair enough.
I don't think they're big
Well,
changes where
I
they're
got
gonna take a long
it's
period of time to
couple
get back
sentences.
in.
I
It's
agree.
also
So we'd
winter-
have them in the clerk's office available for people if anybody does come in to look
So
at it.
it's also winter time, and it's very unlikely anybody's gonna be installing either one of these pieces of equipment the next month.
Although, it was
I
58
see no,
degrees the other
I
day.
see no harm
Yeah.
in waiting till the next meeting.
All right, well, we do have a motion. We had some discussion. Unless someone wants to withdraw their motion, I don't see public comment. So, I think we are in a position to take action on the motion, right? So we have a motion by Mr. Tominello with support by Mr. Batkins to introduce the perfecting amendments and to publish a notice of introduction, and that the full text may be reviewed in the clerk's office during regular business hours, Monday through Friday, 8 AM to 4:30 PM. Mr. Witt?
Mr. Tabanell?
Yes.
Mr. Batkins?
Yes.
Mr. Batanti?
Yes.
Mr. Servil?
No,
Mr. York is excused. Mr. Witt, yes. Mr. Verkest?
Yes. Okay, thank you, board. All right, next on the agenda, item D. Board members, there is a vacancy, in fact, potentially 2 vacancies on the zoning board of appeals for alternates. Ms. Linda Burns Torp has applied for the position of the zoning board of appeals alternate. I believe Ms. Burns Torp has the interest and experience that would make her a good addition to the ZBA. Therefore, I am recommending her appointment to the zoning board of appeals as an alternate for a term to expire January 23, 2020.
Motion to appoint Ms. Linda Burns Torp to the zoning board of appeals as an alternate for a term to expire January 23rd, 2020.
Support.
We have a motion with support. Any discussion?
Mr. Verkest, I have no problem with Ms. Starp. I know her personally, and she's a fine person. She'll serve as a good member. My question would be this, my position was supposed to be open, and you brought forward a name. Why wouldn't you bring that person forward first? Did they withdraw?
No,
It would have made sense to bring them forward, and then when my term is up, they could be elevated to a full member, and then bring on Linda Torp at that time.
Yep.
Plus, you're gonna have another opening for alternate also.
So I can address why I didn't do that, because I
Sure.
understand the question. When I had to submit this, I did not have confirmation from all parties involved, both former and potential candidates, of what their interest level was. There are 2 alternates open, as I understand it, but I wasn't certain of what that was. I was given information, hearsay, saying, well, this person can no longer serve, but I didn't have confirmation of that. It would be my intention to make sure we have 2 alternates, and right now, we have none that I see
Well,
active.
technically, alternates, I believe, serve the same as regular members. They serve until they've been replaced. But one of the alternates,
Well, no, I can't replace them, I can't remove somebody.
no, I'm.
But if their term
Even if their
expires,
term's
term
expired,
expired.
I should have said that. So, technically speaking, you still have 2 alternates. Well, one of them is our state representative. I would only assume that even if his term isn't actually over, that he wouldn't want to serve. He's too busy up in Lansing.
But his term had expired.
Has it? Both of them have then?
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. So let me just say this. Based on the existing terms and the ability to talk to the individuals, I have 1 opening, and I only had confirmation of an interest as an alternate from 1 individual. So I'm bringing Ms. Torp at this time.
Okay.
But it's my intention to bring an additional alternate in the future once I confirm everyone's interest and
Well,
willingness to
my
serve.
suggestion would be to contact the person that you brought forward some time back to fill my position.
Sure.
And, because otherwise, if I were him, I'd think, well, you're slighting me now, Maybe he doesn't wanna be an alternate, I
That's-
don't know.
I think
But-
that's an important point to investigate, and I don't wanna make that assumption.
Correct.
any more
I'm not
than either
making
way.
it either.
Correct,
But
that's why I
just
didn't.
suggest if you have another opening to check with that person,
I
cause you
knew I
had
had-
brought their name forward.
Right, I knew I had one opening, and I knew I had one person who was willing to serve strictly as an alternate, that's what I brought. But it's a good valid point.
So, was there a motion and
It's,
support
yes, it's
already?
made and supported, yep.
All right.
Any further discussion? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Okay, board members, next we have 3 items, items E1, E2, and E3. They're really all related, I think they require 3 separate motions. So I'm gonna read, I'll read Mr. Axtell's, which is actually E3, but the description is about the same. Mr. Axtell has served in the position of Public Services Director for 3 years. During that period, Mr. Axtell's performance has been outstanding. His dedication and effort has helped the department improve. He has established relationships with his peers in other communities. He's created partnerships which have saved the township thousands. Mr. Axtell has worked to improve procedures in the office as well as in the field, and he's still making suggestions and improvements. It's important to understand we have within our, within our employment ranks, unionized employees in 3 different employment contracts. Fire, AFSME, and GELC or supervisory. Within all 3, there are steps, there are salary steps. When you hire in, you may be at step 1. As we discussed in the past, there are multiple steps before you get to maybe the top pay for a position. Within the fire contract and within the AFSCME contract, those steps occur automatically. When we negotiated the supervisory contract many years ago, before I was involved, we added language saying that we wouldn't automatically make those steps, but rather we, in essence, I suppose for lack of a better word, acknowledged the potential for some merit associated with those steps. And the language is permissive. I have the contract and I can read it. Per the supervisory contract, progression up the levels will be upon approval of the Board of Trustees based upon the recommendation of the supervisor after a yearly review. I believe that the majority of board members have had an opportunity to probably work more with Mr. Axtell as opposed to Mr. Murphy and Mr. Ryan. But I can't stress enough that I believe that all 3 individuals have demonstrated their performance, work ethic, attitude, everything that I could possibly review them on to say that they've performed exemplary, and I see no reason they're not worthy of this next pay tier. I'll also let the board know this tier is the final tier for all 3 men. So they have been working for a lower salary of those, that 3 to 4 year step. Within the last contract, we actually negotiated a lower salary for Mr. Axtell. We did not incorporate into these any raises. So, again, this is sort of a matter of semantics. We had these 3 individuals anticipating step increases, but we didn't negotiate that the individual steps themselves would go up by 1% or 2%. So within every other bargaining unit, there's step increases, but there are also wage scale increases. So for example, the firefighters, regardless of what step they were at, got a 2% raise on January 1st. But if their step came up in March, they're also receiving the raise associated with that step. Within this bargaining unit, the raises were 0, but we also acknowledge the fact that all 3 of the individuals that we're talking about tonight were not at the maximum step in their position. So these steps have been in place for the duration of the contract.
And just to sort of, Mr. Supervisor, if I could, I happened to be involved in the negotiations when the contract was changed to allow for this board review. And the intent during the negotiation isn't to, have an opportunity to say, well, we can't afford raises, so we're not gonna do it. It was to make sure that our employees were being looked at, especially at the management level, and then a report being brought back here to the board, so the board had an understanding as to what that management team how they were doing, how they were progressing, because the thought is, at this point, you've only been on the job for, 3 years, you're working towards that 4th year. We want to make sure that you're the right person to have around, and or if there needs to be corrective action or something like that.
Because these are
with-
key leadership roles.
Very key. And so the intent was never to say no, unless there was that performance issue. So,
So are we talking about this now, or?
Yeah, I wanted to give that introduction. We've never been a board that says, well, we're not taking action, we're not discussing until we have a motion. So I would presume a
Well, I
discussion
think
would be
I
appropriate.
think it's appropriate to discuss it first. I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
First off, you said that this is the last step for Mr. Axel, and it's 93,870?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, does that include the stipend that he got for some additional work above and beyond his position?
He receives no stipend.
I thought there was.
That is his final salary.
under the
Okay.
previous contract, there was a stipend. When we renegotiated this contract,
2 contracts ago.
was it?
Yeah, it was
Two.
2
Yeah,
contracts
2
ago. Then we
contracts.
lowered the stipend in the last contract.
All right.
But in essence, what we said was, we're gonna give them these additional chores, and we're gonna pay for that amount, but that, in essence, really became his salary, so there is no step.
So do we have 2 or 3 people that are subject to this same supervisory union contract? We did have an assessor, but that position has been outsourced. So who is there besides the building official and Mr. Axel?
The field superintendent and the foreman, we have a working
Okay,
foreman.
but they're
So we
at a
did-
different level. I'm looking at the
No,
level.
those are the 3 before us. E1, E2, and E3 are the 3 management individuals for the water and sewer
I
department.
guess what I'm asking is, there's 93,870, you say, in the current contract, that's the highest level for the management, the highest level of management.
Public Services Director.
Okay,
correct.
so there's only 2 of those right now then?
There's only 1. So Mr. Axtell is getting 93,870 if this is
Well, I know
approved.
I know Mr. Condon is not at that level.
He won't get to that level. His highest level is 78. Mr. Condon's, everybody doesn't make the same. Mr. Condon's highest pay level
Okay.
at his steps would be 78. Mr. Axtell's increase from 89,970 to 93,870 would be his final increase. But I'm also proposing the final increase for Mr. Murphy, taking him to 71,240, and for Mr. Ryan, taking him to 66,300. What we did with Mr. Ryan in that last round of negotiations, or 2 rounds of negotiations, when we gave Mr. Axtell some additional responsibilities, we acknowledged that he would be the 3rd field supervisory person. So we got a water main break. Not saying Dave never goes out on water main breaks, but Dave, in taking on other responsibilities, what we did is we said, we're gonna take 1 guy from AFSMI, and instead of having 8 field guys, we're only gonna have 7 field guys. We're gonna make 1 a foreman, but he's a working foreman. But in the event that we have a water main break, we don't have only 1 field guy and put it all, because these guys are salary. They love mild winters. They hate cold ones, because they're not getting paid overtime. So these 2 guys behind Dave are the guys, one of those guys responds to a water main break. And if we get clobbered and we have 2 in a row, they call Dave, and Dave goes out there and responds as management in the field.
Okay,
So,
so are you looking for 3 motions or 1?
No, they'd be individual motions, but I felt for discussion purposes, we're talking about in essence the same thing. Each man has a different salary schedule and a different set of responsibilities, and I'm talking about all 3, because, as I said, I think this board is much more familiar with Mr. Axtell's behavior, but as that supervisor overseeing the work that all 3 gentlemen do, I'm content in putting them in the same basket, because I believe the other 2 men that we're considering are as equally hardworking, dedicated, resourceful as Mr. Axtell. Unfortunately, the rest of the board doesn't necessarily have that exposure.
couple of comments?
Yep.
Go ahead.
Before, please, just for due diligence purposes.
Yep.
And that's really all this is. Because we're part of the Township Association, there's a database.
There is.
And if you query the database and you could look up Public Service Director, right? The average salary of a Public Service Director in townships that have at least 9,000 water customers, which we are, right? The average salary in 2015 was $94,000, the average. The range was 77 to 98,000, all right? and that was in 2015. So I would say that it's likely that that average is now above that, a couple of percent at least. That's point number one. Point number two, when you go out and look at step increases that are applied in the public sector, almost always they're applied either once a year or once every 2 years, such as we're doing today. In rare cases, they're held out longer, but that was in cases where there were like 10 steps within a job. So the point I'm making is, the salary we're looking at is average or a little bit below communities that have at least 9,000. And applying this step as we are is a common practice in public organizations. But even more importantly, we need to look at this job. I mean, Mr. Axtell's job is responsible for the safe operation of our water and sewer system and its maintenance. I can't think of too much that's more important than that. And what we need to do is adopt a pay scale that allows us to attract and keep the caliber of people that are commensurate with the importance of that job. And I think that this helps us do that.
Right.
So I just,
Yep.
an
In the
observation.
state licenses, these positions are licensed positions, and all three are S1. Yep, so the highest, so although Dave possesses an S1 license, which is the highest license for the system that we operate, Mr. Murphy and Mr. Ryan do as well. And that's important because when you're in that management role, there are things you need to know. There are decisions you make that could put the jeopardy of could
Absolutely.
put our water system in jeopardy.
Absolutely.
We don't necessarily think about that on a regular day, but you're making a decision. You're gonna make a decision whether there's a need to boil water, whether there could have been a problem, whether you fully understand the operation, not just of a generic water system, but of our very own unique water system. And I can't stress
And-
how
and-
different those two things are.
We need people who are experienced, who are knowledgeable, and I think we're very fortunate to have Mr. Axtell here. And our residents deserve that level of performance, and pay is one of the ways we keep that level of performance. So if it's not obvious, I'm gonna support this.
Well, by supporting this in the form of a motion, we're reinforcing the fact that we feel that he is doing his job, an exemplary job, and he, as a retired builder, I've always looked at it that I wanna hire the person that's the most competent. I wanna get it as cheap as I can, but I'll never hire the cheapest person, cause I know they feel they know what they're worth. You know, and if I have to stand there and supervising them myself, then they're useless to me. I want someone that can do the job without any supervision. And it appears as though Mr. Axel is capable of that, so.
Yeah, and it's that, I know we're talking about all three, and Dave's sitting here, so we keep saying his name, but Mr. Ryan and Mr. Murphy, I've had the pleasure of working with both of them. They have done a fantastic job. The quality of their work allows Dave to take on some of the additional work that he does throughout the township. And
As
it also-
evidenced by the fact that we can see right now.
Yeah. In addition to that, it also, their work and the work of the field personnel allows that department to run at what some from the outside might consider an exceptionally lean staff. So it's through their hard work as leaders and the employees in the field that we're able to run the department as well as we are at the cost we are.
Motion to advance Mr. David Axtell to level 4 Public Service Director for the supervisory contract, effective the next pay period, February 2nd, 2017.
Support.
Second, nope, go ahead.
Sorry.
And a motion-
There was a rush to support that.
Yeah. Motion by Mr. Tominello, support by Mr. Servil. Is there discussion? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Motion to advance Mr. Jeff Ryan to level 4 Water and Sewer Foreman for the supervisor contract, effective the next pay period, February 2nd, 2017.
All right.
Support.
Support by Mr. Witt. Discussion, board? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed? Motion carries. And lastly,
Motion to advance Mr. Justin Murphy to level 4 Water and Sewer Maintenance Supervisor, per the supervisor contract, effective next pay period, February 2nd, 2017.
Support.
support by Mr. Witt again. Discussion? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. All right, next on the agenda is item F, public comment.
If I may, just briefly, I wanna say thank you first, and I also wanna reiterate some of the things that you said. My position, yes, I wear a lot of hats, and so do Mr. Murphy and Mr. Ryan, and if not for their excellent work and the things that they do on a daily basis, I wouldn't be doing a lot of the things that I do for you and the residents here. So my hat goes off to them, they are exceptional employees, as is my whole staff, the water and sewer department. We do run a lean department, but we run a good department. We carry a great business here, and that's bringing our residents safe water and keeping the sewers flowing and the salt and the things on the parking lots and the fire departments and plowing and all those things that all of these gentlemen do. So I just wanna let them know that I do appreciate them as you do, and say thank you.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is public comment. Is there any public comment?
You always go first. Why don't you let them other people talk?
Thank you. William Bardell, 20-year resident. I appreciate the service from the Harrison Township Water Department, but good thing I got my boots on. But anyway, just think about that when the next negotiation comes up. Are you sure you're not giving the other team the upper hand? So we pay them what they're worth, and let's think about the future. Let's not blow so much smoke. They get paid a good amount of money. Let's not fool ourselves. Okay? They should also return phone calls. I'd like everybody to please come on out and check out Save Lake St. Clair on Facebook. A lot of interesting things on it. And with that, I'd like to wish residents and members, board members, a safe and wonderful evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other public comment, we'll close the floor for public comment. Move back to board comment.
Just one thing, I should have mentioned it during announcements. The passport agency has changed the time frame for return on passports. Instead of 4 to 6 weeks, it's now a straight up 6 weeks. So if you're doing spring break or anything like that and you need a passport to leave the country, please make sure you call and schedule an appointment at the clerk's office earlier than you might have. 586-466-1406. We can get you set up and make sure you're all set.
What are the current fees for, if you do the photo and everything?
It's $110 to the U.S. Department of State. It's $25 for application and $10 for the photo.
145. If my math is correct. It is. All right.
Larry, do we have a date for bowling, Parks and Rec? Has that date been,
March 11th is the Park and Rec Bowling
gathering?
It's
fun evening.
Yeah, but it's kids bowling, right?
Better
No,
late
it's,
than never,
It's kids
but
and adults.
Oh, you're gonna do it both, okay.
Yeah, it's kids and adults.
where is that being held?
It's gonna be at,
Total?
Total Sports, yep.
All right.
So we'll have more information coming probably at the next meeting.
Yeah, we'll put it on the township website.
Yeah,
so
just
forth.
start, pencil it in, March,
Yep, March 11.
Yep.
All right.
I do have a question, just real quick on all these, step-ups.
Yep.
Do we have anything in place for next up? Like if Dave retires in the next 10 years, is there the master plan? Has that, who keeps track of that? Like who's going to replace all these folks that are getting closer to the door? So
Are
I
you
know some of
talking
the
like-
large corporations have what they call next up.
Succession plans.
Yeah, so I just, I don't think we need to talk about it, I don't even need an answer, but that's just something that I would be curious to know.
Well, the answer isn't truly a yes or no, but to the extent that we can. So let me give you a good example of that. Within Mr. Axtell's department, or I'll say within our water and sewer department, we've come to know or understand, I have, maybe others already knew it, but promotion from within is more important than it can be in other departments. So for example, a licensed building official is a fairly, a little bit more generic position to fill, right? Building codes are building codes. We could put out a request for applications. We'd probably get a fair pool of applicants appropriate for the size of our community. And maybe that new building official might not have a skill set associated with seawalls or floodplains if they came from another part of our region. But you'll pick it up. On the other hand, our water and sewer system is a very, very intricate, local, understood and appreciated system. So part of the value in having the two gentlemen that work with Dave is to have not only succession, excuse me, not only succession within the future, but also short-term succession. In the event that we, lose Dave to some temporary illness, or Dave wants to go on vacation, I need a couple other guys that you basically assume and spread out that work. So from that perspective, within that department, that process of succession is much more important, and we've got that there. It isn't as important, and it is harder to do within, say, the building department, because we have a limited number of people there, so. But the flip side is, you can contract with a building official, they can come in and provide that service in a relatively short period of time, and you're gonna get 90% of the work done. So, but it would be hard to contract, say, well, we're gonna hire some outside firm to come in and know the intricacies of our water and sewer system. Make sense?
And, one other thing that I just wanted to ask about, as we talk about, sewer system, we're gonna, scan it all and do all that. What are we doing for our water main? Have we done any type of study? Okay, then I'll stop and see Dave and get that answer, we don't need to talk about that anymore.
I think that was one of the first things I did back in '09, was we approved Dave to build a whole entire model, a flow system and everything. It's like a technical.
I'll
We have a
stop
water
it,
study and I have a copy at the office.
I'll stop and see you, Dave, thank you.
Just briefly to touch on what you're saying, and Mr. Guest, I don't wanna drag this out, because I know we all wanna go home, but, touched on the licenses, myself being an S1 certified. Justin is field supervisor, is S1 certified, Jeff is S1 certified as a foreman, and I also have 2 field personnel that are S1 certified. That is something, when I started here, the 2 bosses were S1 certified, and that was it. And when they were leaving, that's when it all hit the fan.
Yeah, we actually had a grievance because someone wanted to get paid extra to utilize the S1 license. We were successful. It wasn't a realistic grievance, but we had to
And
deal with
literally,
it.
I was put into the foreman, at that time it was S2, I was put into the foreman position, and this position opened up, and literally I took my test in November and passed the exam, as did Justin and Jeff at that time. So we went from 0 S1s to 3 S1s to now 5 S1s. So that's, as Mr. Burkest is saying, promoting from within, it's a great opportunity for the gentleman in the field, but it's also a great opportunity for Harrison Township to have these qualified people on hand, because as you said, you can bring an outside person in to do my job, there's no doubt about it. There isn't anybody I don't feel that isn't replaceable, but to have the history and some of the experience, and I never pretend to know everything is, I don't think anybody should, but there are, as you said, intricacies of the system and a little bit of history that goes with that.
And we can all relate to that if we've been, say you happen to have the assignment to work at a plant for 10 years, and a newbie comes in and says, hey, there's a problem going on with something. Your prior 10 years of experience should allow you to say, well, I've had that happen before, or I know what that is, as opposed to going through a lengthy process to determine that. So, not, maybe to satisfy the residents, not just Dave. I mean, it just happens when you're at a job for long enough. I'd like to think Mr. Huth is
Justin and Jeff, there are things that they are more experienced at.
just
They
from
may have
doing the job.
Greater experience of things than I do, and vice versa.
Absolutely.
And I'd like to
That's why
point
it's
out
18.
the total cost for personnel in water and sewer, I don't have the exact numbers, but I'd venture to guess that it's a small percentage of what residents pay annually for water and sewer bills, and what it costs us to maintain the system, otherwise, materials that we buy. So, in the scheme of things, giving merit raises doesn't really impact the residents' bills very much.
Yeah, and I would be cautious to say that these are merit raises, but rather steps to get to what we think is a competitive wage for the position we're employing, and somewhat reflected by Mr. Batante's research. So, be looking for a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Is there support?
Support.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. Meeting adjourned. Thank you, board.